I have not liked this trilogy, and I've been on record. This is not my thing. I think they've all been very, very bad films, but of different levels of badness. And I thought coming in, this would not at least be as bad or worse than Halloween Kills, but shockingly, it actually was worse than Halloween Kills in many ways. But it did have enough decent moments and a few scenes that were somewhat decent, and the characters felt like real people. So I'm going to be forced to say this is slightly better than Halloween Kills. And believe me, I don't want to say this either, but I would have to be forced to say 2018 is slightly superior because all these films are plagued by the same problems. They have editing mistakes, they have continuity issues, there's inconsistencies with characters, with powers, with the mythology, etc., etc. And they abuse the flashbacks. You go through the list. There's the same structural difficulties and problems, but this one did tone down the cringe dialogue. There is still a lot of cringe dialogue, don't get me wrong, but they toned it down slightly. I appreciated that. They did play the classical music. I like that. And there were bits and moments that felt like they were going to go somewhere with the story, but then they abandoned it. Overall, it's an insanely stupid mess, but there were moments that felt good and strong. But ironically, this is probably the weakest of the trilogy in terms of specific things. Like the soundtrack was not that good. I thought the soundtrack would be amazing, and it was, but only in a few places. In some places, the songs were very inappropriate. They did not make sense. Also, the sound editing was pretty strong, but there were times where like the ADR or the dialogue, I couldn't hear it correctly, or it was too low, or it didn't make any sense. So the dialogue was worse in Halloween Kills, but here it was much more inconsistent because at least there, like Tommy Doyle, yes, fine, he's a crazy mob mentality maniac, but they kept that. Here, characters kept radically shifting. Like Laurie Strode is a different character in every film, but here, I'm not sure how they did it. She manages to be like three different characters. And one of the characters is a complete monster. Like, she's genuinely more evil than Michael. I'm not even joking. She literally helps create the new Michael through Corey. What is this film about if you're completely new? Well, basically, a tragic accident happens. And I'm putting tragic in quotation marks because that little kid was such a monster. Like, Corey didn't even do anything bad, but he accidentally kills a kid. The town hates him. Apparently, he can't leave town. Don't know why, because later on they do talk about leaving. And Laurie initially takes pity on him. Through her, he meets Allison. And I'm not joking, for the first 20 to 30 minutes, I wanted to just stop watching it. And I'm like, I'm just going to piece together from the other clips what happened because I am getting bored. It's stupid. I hate this thing. But then it got decent for a good chunk, like of 12 minutes. It was amazing. And it felt like, okay, fine, this is not going to be a good film, but maybe it'll be just like a meh film. And then they start contradicting that. Things become inconsistent. It becomes super stupid for another 20 minutes. And then it gets decent for like 8 minutes. And then it goes back to being super stupid. And that's the entire film. It's just very erratic, very zigzag structure. They do things that I did not predict, and that was fine. I was surprised in a few moments, pleasantly. But in most places, like, oh, I know where we're going. They went there, but they went there in more cringe ways than I could have predicted. Like, the epic fight they built up to is decent. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's okay. And I know people are saying Michael Myers comes off like a little bitch. I understand that. I'm with them in sentiment, but I'm forced to say this. Believe me, I do not like this film, but they do kind of explain why he's so weak. They do. And they do explain a little bit why he gets stronger. The problem is it's not consistent. Essentially, Corey helps him out with one of the victims. Michael kills the victim, and I'm not joking. He's like pumping his fists, and so you're like, oh, he's getting his magical penis juice back or whatever. Okay, so old Michael's coming back. He helps out a little bit more with some killings, and then he gets really weak again. And Corey just tosses him around. They do struggle, and he gets the mask. And you're like, why do you need the mask? I don't know. And Corey needlessly taunts him. So that was just strange. This film makes Michael Myers out to be a victim, because really, they kind of abuse and manipulate him, and they blame him for everything. And when you think it through, him and Corey basically killed mostly bad people, so you're like, what is this film trying to say? It's trying to keep talking about evil, and Michael's a manifestation of evil, and he's spreading evil, but really, mostly Michael was just chilling out. He wasn't even hurting people. The only time we heard he was doing something bad is the hobo said, oh, he kept taking people and they disappeared. Well, if he did that, he should be superpowered again. So it made no sense. This film is 90% complete nonsense and garbage. But 10% of it was cohesive and coherent enough. And if you want to concentrate on that part and praise that part, I have no issue with that. But I do have issues with people saying, well, it's legit good film on its own. No, there are a ton of plot holes, ton of editing problems. Like, Laurie does magic teleportation. I'm not joking. She literally just disappears out of a house, and Corey is puzzled for a couple minutes. So she has magic teleportation powers, but she loses it near the end. And then there's another moment when Corey's with a victim. He's trying to grab the victim struggles and gets out of it. He just disappeared from the scene, and he reappears somewhere else. Again, magic teleportation. How do you do that? Don't know. They gonna explain it? Nope. There's just so many major inconsistencies, editing problems, continuity mistakes. Is just very, very jarring. It's very hard to take seriously. But I did appreciate a few things. Where the soundtrack is good, it is good. The acting with Allison and Corey themselves is actually pretty strong. I thought that would be the most boring section, but that actually was not as awful as I predicted. A huge chunk of it is really bad, but some of it was actually pretty decent. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And believe me, I've not really liked Allison for most of this trilogy, but here I finally could see, like, okay, she's seductive and sexy and beautiful now. I can see why men are doing this and being around her, because in the other ones, she frankly felt repulsive. I could not understand why all these men are obsessed with her. But here, they got that part right. And the acting was fairly decent with her and Rohan as well. So that was pretty good. And the weakest part was really Laurie. She wasn't in the film that much, but when she was there, her jokes were really too snarky. She had an attitude problem a lot. She just kept talking down to people. She was really stuck up. And the narration went way overboard. Like, you think to yourself, okay, she's talking for like 3 sentences. She's going to stop. No, she just kept going and going and going. It just got really insane and stupid. But there were a few good twists. I won't lie. Some of the kills were nice and artistic. They were well done. And they do pay off certain moments they laid out in the earlier parts of the trilogy. However, overall, does this really work with 2018 and kills? No. This is really its own story. You really have to see the movie Christine and even read the book by Stephen King. Otherwise, you will be puzzled for most of this film. I'm going to have to be very severe on this and give it, I'd say, somewhere in the vicinity of like 4.25, 4.5, 4.75. It's not a good film. There are perhaps enough good moments you want to pay full price for it. I don't think it even meets stat standard. You should just wait for it on cable. You really don't need to even see it. You know Laurie's going to win, Michael's going to get killed, and the epic fight is not even that good, so just wait for some YouTube clips. You'll piece it together yourself. But it does have some good moments. I can't deny that. It's just the bad moments just far outweigh the good, and there was just a lot of potential here, but it really didn't go anywhere. There are stories that they start with and just stop and just go on to another story, but that story isn't very interesting, so it's just an erratic mess. It's just a complete mess. But they do explain a few things, and they do tie up a few loose ends, but it's very, very weak. I'd say Kills is still worse, but this isn't much better, and the good moments I don't think can negate the really bad moments, so there you are. I don't recommend seeing this unless you want to torture yourself, but if you do want to stick through the really bad, boring, and stupid moments to get to the good stuff, it is there. You have to be patient, but it's very erratic, but it is there, and that's what we have. Halloween Ends. The final conclusion of this insane, stupid trilogy.